Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're having a couple of technical difficulties at the beginning there, but welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for the virtual launch of the Emptiest Quarter. My name is Ashley Nielsen, and I'm the marketing person for Signature Editions. Before we begin, I would just like to give a land acknowledgement. While this book launch is virtual and people are potentially tuning in from around the world, it's important to remember the Indigenous peoples of the lands that we are on today. Signature Editions is located on Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, Dene, and Oji-Cree peoples, and homeland of the Métis Nation. So just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before I introduce our guest of honor and our host. So firstly, after Raymond has done his readings, we'll be answering questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, just type them in the comment section and we will answer them at the end. We are also going to be doing a giveaway, so you could win a copy of both The Emptiest Quarter as well as Denise's collection of short stories, Brilliant. All you need to do to be entered is to leave a question in the comments section, and we will draw a winner at the end of the event. If you are based in Canada, we will mail you physical copies of both of those books. And if you're based elsewhere in the world, then we'll send you ebook copies. And lastly, there is links to purchase The Emptiest Quarter, both in the description as well as pinned in the comments. So please be sure to get your hands on your copy of The Emptiest Quarter so you can enjoy these wonderful novellas. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our host for today, Denise. So let's bring Denise on screen. Welcome, Denise. Denise Roy is the author of 3 short story collections, Brilliant, Any Day Now, and A Quiet Night and a Perfect End, as well as the memoir Buttercream, all of which were published by Signature Editions. Denise has lived around the world, including New York, Los Angeles, Montreal, Abu Dhabi, and now in Hamilton, Ontario. And her experiences of living in different cities around the world have influenced and are reflected in her writing. Welcome, Denise.
Thanks, Ashley.
And our guest of honor, Raymond. Hi, Raymond. Raymond Bouchemin has worked as a writer and editor at newspapers in Boston, Montreal, and Toronto. His first books were as an editor of anthologies of Quebec fiction, and his first novel, Everything I Own, came out in 2011. In January of 2008, he moved to Abu Dhabi, where he joined the staff of The National, which is a Western-style English-language newspaper in the United Arab Emirates capital, where the novellas of The Emptiest Quarter find their inspiration. Welcome, Raymond, and I'm going to pass things over to both of you so that you can start your readings and questions and all of that.
Let me start by saying thank you to Ashley and Signature Editions for coordinating this, and welcome to everyone out there, and everyone out there live. And then, of course, this is being recorded, so we'll be welcoming people who view the recording later. So, hello there, future people. So I did leave Montreal for Abu Dhabi in January of 2008. Denise and our daughter Georgia joined me there in late August of the same year. We came back in late summer 2011 and to Canada in time for the start of the school year because Georgia was starting her sophomore year of high school. And sometime during that year, we went to our first public event, and I heard a land acknowledgement for the first time. So I appreciate what Ashley read from the Treaty 1 land acknowledgement, because they are all different across Canada. And we can forget, given all the acknowledgements I think that we've probably heard now, the spirit in which they were created and in which they're said. And, sometimes they do feel a little bit like lip service. It's been very interesting Georgia and I have been watching a series of documentaries called Treaty on the Aboriginal People's Television Network, APTN. It's probably available online, aptn.ca or .com or something like that. We watch them on TV. So I would so I have a sense of a little bit about what the Treaty One place and the history behind that is like. So I would, in that spirit, then read a short excerpt from the Emptiest Quarter. There aren't any Canadian First Nations there, but the Empty Quarter, what they call Al Rimal or the Sands, uh, were home and continue to be home to Bedouin people who are very much a part of the culture, I'd say, and the history certainly of the United Arab Emirates. The wind blew my people here many years ago. In search of water, they smelled moisture in the air and followed the scent to Liwa. The village rose around wells of water and groves of date palms on the edge of Al Rimal. The settlers were from old, once upon a time tribes. The clans stood shoulder to shoulder with one another, like siblings, sometimes given to quarrel, sometimes to defense of the blood. They peopled the desert in the summer and the coast in the winter. Their names are legend. They were the Menasir and the Albu Mahir, the Rumatat, the Kubeasat, the Mazari, and Sudan. And although the stitchings of their rugs were different one from the other, though some spoke with an accent as flat as the roof of their Arish homes, they shared the common element of their faith. Every one of them Maliki Sunnis. They were not Wahhabi Sunnis. These people were from the West, from the lands of the Saud, and their fighting with the Bani Yas in the 1800s and 1900s, when my grandfather and father lived, led to the creation of the frontier between Saudi Arabia and what would become this country. So I was just trying to get a sense there about the connection of the people to the land, which I think we miss sometimes in the land acknowledgements here in Canada. Over to you, Dan.
Um, Ray, each of, each of the three novellas in the Emptiest Quarter is written in a different tone and style, and each is set in a different period in the history of the United Arab Emirates. Can you talk about this and read some excerpts from the novellas that speak to this wide range in time, tone, and point of view?
Absolutely. Am I seen there? I look black.
You're frozen actually on my screen.
Ashley, are we am I visible? Maybe
Hi, Ray.
somebody
You're frozen. Maybe try just hitting refresh on your screen and see if that fixes things.
okay. Reload site.
Live video. The all those silly technical difficulties. There we go.
Yes.
I think
All
things are
right.
back.
I'm okay. I'm back. All
Okay.
right. All right. Well, the novella is the book is set is divided in three. The excuse me. The first novella is called Tent. The second called Oil, and the last one is called Identity. And the tent one is I wouldn't want to call it a fairy tale. It's more like a because that connotes this kind of once upon a time thing, which means that it actually happened. You know, it's the types of things that you tell kids in the West, at least. More, it's like it's a tale or a fable. So in Arabic, there's the phrase "kanya makan," which means maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, which leaves a little bit of doubt. And so that story is set in an old, long ago. As I read in, as I you got that in set in the 1800s and 1900s. Even though the narrator is speaking from the present. So I'll just give you a little bit of a sense of what I meant by fairy tale or fable. To the foreigner, the wind in the dunes outside Liwa conveys nothing on its back. To the foreigner, the edge of the Rub al Khali is so dead, the air transmits no sound, and one's voice carries no farther inside the empty quarter of one's skull. But for us, these million square miles of emptiness we call the sands, or Al Rimal, are not empty. Here, our fathers worshipped the one God who created the expansive sand and sky and sea to remind us of our insignificance, from whom the prophet, peace be upon him, received blessing and grace and his holy word, and to whom are turned the face and breath of those who have lived and will live here. The sand is dense with their stories. Their memories reverberate in the wind, echo in the waves. This is what we hear. When the wind blows, I can feel dust from the ruin of long ago encampments coat my skin, my lips. Those are the times I think, this is what it was like at the beginning, when a people rose up out of the sand, gathered at the sea, and looked to the skies. So intent, I did try to establish a little bit of that that fable like way of writing, and obviously could not carry that through to something that is a little bit more current, right? Oil is set in the late 1930s to the mid to late 50s, a time of when oil was just being discovered. It hadn't been pulled out of the ground yet, but they were just discovering it in Abu Dhabi. Um, and there, the oil is told from the perspective of an older woman. She's in her 80s now. She's back in London, but she's recounting her life from when she was, say, 11 years old to a time when she was maybe in her late 20s, early 30s. Um, so here, and throughout the second novella, Oil, she is her character's name. The character's name is Rose. Rose is she addresses her love interest as you throughout the whole novella, and you, we end up discovering, is a rather powerful sheikh. So here I want to. It's from the second novella. It's called Oil, and it's a part where um, she's kind of starting to. She's 11 years old, and he is 10 years older, and he is about to. She's really starting to fall in love with the guy. I have a surprise for you, you said. But everything is a surprise, I said. You're invited to a wedding, you said. A wedding! I must have shrieked. The men, by now moved away from the fire and, sitting on a large rug in a tent father called a majlis, all turned toward me. Father was frowning. The Arab men laughed. You made the announcement. A Bedouin family who was close to your heart, close to your family, had invited you to the wedding of their daughter. The family understood you were engaged with business, foreigners among them, but they would be honored by our presence. They insisted. There will be camel to eat, and much music and dance, you said. But I have nothing to wear, I said, not even thinking about what you'd said about eating a camel. You wear a smile, as a bride wears jewels, you said. And I blushed. First time in my life that I was aware of. No one had ever paid me such a flirtatious compliment. I smiled. When do we go? When you are ready, inshallah, you said. I was ready right then. But we had to wait for the men, whom you joined in the majlis. I retreated to my tent, where I changed into the one dress I had brought. When I came out, you were in deep, almost private discussion with father. I hovered nearby, close enough to hear, but not privy to the meaning of your talk. The dress was red, with white polka dots, and dropped below the knees in pleats from the pinched waist, which was tied with a bow of the same material. The dress wasn't formal in any sense. I was only 11, after all. The um, the last novella is called Identity, and there although I think the whole perhaps book is about identity. This one really felt um, that it was important that this is set current times. It's in just as the Arab Spring was exploding around the Middle East and North Africa. So everyone in the Arab world was exploring this kind of notion of identity, whether politically or culturally. Um, so, um, so I'll just read another brief excerpt here where um, actually I should explain a little bit more. Identity is itself then broken up into three parts, all centered around a young Western trained Emirati Syrian journalist named Hadil and her twin brother Hamza. And then the last part is focused on a French Canadian journalist, war correspondent, who is now based in Abu Dhabi. His name is Mark. So here, Mark and Hadil are meeting for the first time. He's just interviewed Hadil's grandfather, who is the storyteller in the first novella, Tent. He's something else, your grandfather, Mark said, and spun away from his keyboard to look at her. Loves to talk. Grandfather Razul has a story for every occasion, she said, and removed the shayla from over her head and face. Her hair, thick and black, she kept pinned in the back. She wore no makeup, simply a touch of gloss on her lips. She stood about 4 inches shorter than he, so 5'5". Slender, 110, and cute. Late 20s, 30 at the outmost, he thought. Stop, stop. She stepped forward half a foot and reached out her hand in a most un-Emirati female way. I'm Hadil al-Rimali, by the way. Mark hesitated for a second, then stood up and shook her hand. Firm, confident handshake. Always nice to match a byline with a face.
So we seem to have lost Denise.
Oh,
I'm hoping she'll pop back up in a moment. But just to mention again to people watching to leave any questions that you may have for Raymond in the comments section. We'll be getting to those shortly. And also, if you leave a comment, then you'll get automatically entered for our giveaway for a copy of The Emptiest Quarter and Brilliant. So I know Denise had some questions that she had prepared for you, but I did
yes.
have one question of my own while we're waiting for Denise
Sure.
to join us again. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of writing the novellas? Did you write them in order? Did you bounce between the three of them? What
Hmm.
did that look like?
I had I had started when I originally conceived of the book. It was a novel, and I started where tent starts. The people coming to the people in the desert in the summer and the coast in the winter, and but I realized that it didn't take very long. I think I was probably just three paragraphs in, and I realized, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. I mean, I had a structure in my head of what of the stories that I needed to tell, and I couldn't see how the grandfather's fables was going to work with Rose's love, her Orientalist kind of love of the idea of Abu Dhabi, and then work that into Mac and Hadil's story. So I very, very soon, in the process, I realized it was going to have to be separate novellas.
Mm.
Um, Originally, it was four. I have tent, oil, commerce, and identity, which I for it was actually it came. I think those the four things were Denise's idea, the
Oh,
titles, and mostly that had to do with the colors of the flag. We had red, green, white, and black. Black was oil. White, well, let's see. Red was probably identity. I think white or I can't. Oh, green was commerce and white was tent. Um, and um, so then it was just a matter of telling the stories and having them work with those work within those titles, those ideas. So tent clearly felt that was going to be historical. Oil was going to be next because historically that's what came next, and that's where that's where all the money came from. Then commerce um, was the story, and I'll get back to that in a second. Then obviously identity, because that is still the big question for Emiratis. Who are we? And who are we in terms of our history, tent? Who are we in terms of the wealth that we created from oil and commerce? In the end, the editor of Signature Editions, Karen Hyan, and I uh, realized that commerce did not fit. It was um, the three others are linked by the story the grandfather tells, and it felt forced to link it in commerce, which was told from the perspective of a gay Indian driver, and it's kind of a flaneur kind of story where he's just walking around Abu Dhabi, and it just wasn't working. I mean, I love the story, but it wasn't working within this collection. And Denise is back.
Denise is
yes.
back. I
The
am
funny thing is
so
the
sorry.
funny thing is that commerce, in terms of writing, commerce was the one that I wrote first.
Oh,
I wrote it in 2 mornings. Got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, wrote till about 6 or 7, and so actually I wasn't. I probably I'd say 2 mornings, but it was probably about 10 hours altogether, where I just wrote it in a flash, and I still have a soft spot for it, but I don't know. Maybe it'll get published separately some other time.
welcome back, Denise.
Thank you. Where are we?
Hi.
I lost my
Um,
connection. I'm so sorry.
oh well, Ashley asked a question about how the book came apart. Came not came apart. Sorry, came
Came
about.
together.
Came together.
Yes.
So, if your second question,
Okay, fantastic. Apologies. Um,
no problem.
I'm on my phone actually because can't get in any other way. The recorded history of the UAE is quite short, especially when seen through the far longer lens of world history. Um, but the country, the UAE, has vaulted through the past century. The way it's vaulted through so quickly is nothing short of staggering. For a young country, the Emirates, especially Abu Dhabi and Dubai, have exerted an outsized influence. And what do you believe is at the root of its importance?
Oh, uh, well, the the root of its importance is oil. I mean, that's it right there. If they hadn't discovered oil in the late 30s, early 40s, if they hadn't started pulling it out of the ground in the 50s and 60s, they wouldn't be where they are. They would just be still a country of, you know, camel jockeys, which is not a nice way of putting it, but that's essentially what it would be. Uh, they, they they were they were poor before then, and now they're not. Um, so it really is oil that created this massive wealth that we see on display in Dubai. Less so in Abu Dhabi. There, it is a much more conservative um, emirate, but that wealth is there. Now, in terms of influence, they've taken that money to make friends everywhere in that Middle Eastern area. And some of those friends are not necessarily friends. You know, their relationship with Israel is was crazy. When we were there, you couldn't fly from any of the Emirates to Jerusalem. Couldn't, you know, you'd have to, you know, perhaps fly to Amman, Jordan, and then drive from Jordan across the bridge into Israel. But now, uh, God bless Donald Trump. He actually put together this Abraham Accord, and there is a relationship now between those two countries. And of course, it's a little weird. It's not a relationship that the Emiratis might have done on their own naturally, but those two countries have a common antagonist, Iran. Uh, Despite the fact that the United Arab Emirates. You go to any of the ports, especially the port in Dubai, and there's dhows coming in, these big ships and boats coming in from Iran all the time, loaded with goods. So yeah, okay, there's some antagonism there, especially in in terms of the war in Yemen. But money's money, and that's that's what makes the Emirates go around. Um, So I've just got this one very short excerpt from the oil from the oil novella that kind of they understood this very early on. So this is the oil novella, and so a reminder that when you is the sheikh, there is a seam, you said, that runs south from Iraq. It is a vein full of oil, black gold, that will lift the people of Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, all of us here in these desert lands, out of poverty. You stopped, looked up, and around at the tents, the dunes farther off, the sky. When you return, you will not recognize us, inshallah. You said this with sadness, as if you knew the cost of progress even then. When you return, the barbaric splendor with which the West associates us will not be so barbaric anymore, and splendid Abu Dhabi will be as indistinguishable from a British village as these oil men are from the agents who accompany them. Of course, it didn't turn out quite that way. I, there's not a British village that I know of that looks like Dubai.
So true. Um, I've read these novellas a few times, as you know, and one of the things that struck me on this last reading is the theme that weaves through all of them, the yearning for peace. What does that search look like for the different characters in the three novellas?
That's a good question. Um, we're all looking for a quiet night and a perfect end. to to quote the title of one of your stories. Um, peace takes can mean very, very different things to different people, right? You can what does it mean to search for peace? Um, does that mean it's something calming, kind of like this yoga thing that just comes over you? Is that peace within yourself, in other words, or is it peace with what's around you, or even making peace, right? Um, Israel isn't going away, you know. The Emiratis at some point they decide, you know what, we got to make peace with this, and they did. Um, in terms of the novellas, um, the first one, Tent, which follows a character named Adam, Aidan, Adam. Kind of, to me, it was kind of like Adam is the first man, even though he has a father. um, so Adam is he's a boy who as an infant he is lost in the desert, and he's found by a family that then raises him. Throughout his life, he is in a search for peace, essentially, and he's going to find it. Is he going to find it in the desert? He's going to find it in the sands. Where his adoptive father is growing has a is a rich man because of his date palms. Uh, or is he going to find it? Is Adam going to find it at sea, which he is completely mystified by and attracted to, and eventually he becomes a pearl diver. And when he stops diving to the dangerous occupation, um, he ends up making his money, his wealth, by making shirts and clothing that is impenetrable to jellyfish, the poisonous ones. And then also he's looking to the skies, So it's really all there, right? I tried to make it a very physical. He's trying to make peace with his physical self, and eventually, of course, he as an old man in his 70s or 80s, he falls in love and has a child. So he has that peace. In Oil, Rose is in love with the sheikh that she addresses as you. She's in love with the idea of what this country could become. So it's a very Orientalist tale in that sense. Um, and So the piece that she's looking for is complicated, right? It's a piece that she wants to make with the sheikh, and then there's the piece in the end that she has to make with herself because of decisions that she makes. And in the third one, Identity, you're in the middle of the Syrian war, and in the Arab Spring. So there's the idea of peace there is a lot more complex. You've got Hamza, who is a Emirati fighter pilot, part of the coalition that the U.S. created. So these guys are flying jets over Syria, and so there's a peace that he has to come to in terms of his decisions. There's the piece that Hadil has to make as well, in terms of the work that she wants to do as a journalist, and the relationship that she, as an Emirati woman, is attempting to have with a Western man, which is kind of frowned on. And of course, there's Mac himself, who, as a war correspondent, suffers from serious post-traumatic stress disorder. And so there's the peace that he needs to feel inside.
Thank you. It was a wonderful comprehensive answer. Um, your first novel, Everything I Own, also encompasses a span of history and subjects from Quebec politics to Quebec music to the eternal struggle between fathers and sons. As a writer, you have a keen sense of place and a talent for bringing many elements into that place. It's certainly all here in the Emptiest Quarter. Endless sand, melting heat, the juxtaposition of tents and glass towers, food you can almost taste and smell. Yet with all this physical texture, all this particular detail, you you never presume to penetrate the mystery of this contradictory place.
Hmm.
You leave us with its beauty and its brutality and no answers, just experience. Um, let's hear some more from the Emptiest Quarter.
That was beautiful to hear, Dan. Thank you. You really read these. You read them carefully. You read them closely. Thank you. um, we've got about 20 minutes left, so let me just read two short excerpts, and then we'll see what kind of time we have, because I do want to see if there are questions from folks. Because the more questions we have from different people, then the more entrance we have to the giveaway. So um, I mentioned Hamza earlier, that he's a fighter pilot. So here, from Identity, the first part of Identity, um, Hamza has returned home. He's on break, and or on leave, I should say. Excuse me. And he's confronting his father. So there's a bit of fathers and sons that goes through the Identity portion. Before Hamza, on a divan and on his cell phone, despite the glare of the television, reclines his father, Nadim bin Razul Al Ghurair Al Ramali, the fourth generation to carry the family name and the laissez faire majority owner of a company built on cotton sheaths for pearl divers, but which branched out after the Second World War and the collapse of the pearl industry into swimwear and outerwear. Also, amateur day trader, father of three, divorced husband. The room is dark. Hamza pulls back the drapes, locates the remote on the coffee table under empty paper cups in a large velvet box of chocolates, and mutes the television. His father squints, looks up. What? He says. Hamza picks a blanket off the cool tile floor and tosses it at his father. Cover yourself, he says. What's your problem? Nadim says and sits up. You're naked. What if one of the maids walks in here? They know what to do. Father and son regard each other for a moment. Neither says a word. Then, with a huff, Nadim cradles the phone between his shoulder and ear and says, I gotta go. Hamza the steadfast and pure has darkened the door. He listens for a moment as he searches for his boxer shorts. His nod is automatic. He says, Yes, just sell it, into the phone, then, mashallah, pulls on his pants and presses the button to disconnect before he tosses the phone on the couch. To what do we owe this visit? You scare away all of Bashir Assad's bad soldiers? You read the newspapers, Hamza says. You have as good an idea of what goes on as I do. Oh, yes, I read the newspapers all right, his father says, then reaches under his shorts and scratches himself. One last reading. This, I think, might be one of my favorite things to read. Because Dan, you said something about food. I don't think you can write good fiction without mentioning getting food in there somewhere. Novel, short story. Just love it. So this is from the beginning of Hadil's portion of the last novella called Identity. What Hadil wouldn't do for some poutine. It must be the most unhealthy, most cholesterol-laden dish known to man, but for the love of Allah, she wants some. It's so unhealthy. In fact, why hasn't someone begun selling it in Abu Dhabi or Dubai? Any proper Emirati would eat it right up. Inhale it at an iftar buffet at one of the downtown hotels. The fast food burger joints that serve poutine in Canada are all present and accounted for in the UAE. You'd think one of them would have thought to add it to the menu. And then some fancy Montreal-trained hotel chef would class it up, add foie gras as they do at Au Pied de Cochon, though Hadil dismisses the thought. Pate from a restaurant devoted to all things pork is not exactly halal. Better yet, butter chicken poutine. Yes, that's it. Given all the Indians and Pakistanis in the UAE, it'd be a sure hit. Not that most of them could afford to eat in the hotels, and the owners of the labor camps sure as hell won't put up money for cheese curds. But the middle managers might find it within their means, supervisors and the like. And if butter chicken poutine, why not mixed grill or falafels? The Jordanians regularly put French fries in their falafel sandwiches anyway, topped with hot sauce. Hadil knows this is crazy, but she can't help herself. When she gets hungry, her mind goes on and on. Binge thinks, since at the moment she's not so much into binge eating. Mexican. It might be on the menu at Cantina Laredo at the Caladia Mall. French fry base with a sizable dollop of enchilada sauce, a mix of Monterey Jack cheese, young cheddar, and a bit of asadero for meltability, topped with strips of chicken that have been rubbed with Yucatan spices before slow cooking in a pot. The picture is so vivid. Hadil knows the cantina must be serving Cancun-style poutine as she thinks it. And the minute she's out of Syria and back in Abu Dhabi, she'll drive to the mall and order it. 2 orders, and eat them right there. With a virgin mojito and a virgin margarita. If Hadil can get out of Syria, by God's grace, she'll also get her sorry ass to Montreal and have that foie gras poutine and wash it down with a good vintage champagne or a well-oaked Chardonnay. But first things first, Hadil al-Ramali must get out of Syria. Thank you.
Wonderful. Are we ready to move on to questions from the
Yes.
audience? Okay.
Yes. Ashley, are you going to you're going to go through the public part of the
Yeah.
comment section and
Yeah,
pick a
so
few?
we've got a
That's great.
few questions. Rebecca said, how has your perspective changed on the UAE since returning to Canada? And was it strange to write these stories set in a very specific place when you no longer live there anymore?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Rebecca. Um, and thank you for joining us. Rebecca and I were colleagues at the National in Abu Dhabi. Um, yeah. I think, yeah, it was. I suppose it was a little strange to to be here, but then not really because when I got here and I was working on another novel at the time and it eventually got rejected, but um, I s- I just enveloped myself so much in anything I could that was Emirati, that was Abu Dhabi. I mean, I just read and read and read. You know, I read Wilfred Thesiger, Crossing the Sands. I read. Anybody recognize this young woman? Edna O'Brien. I
Mm.
just I just read everything I could, and and so I was kind of living in two worlds, really. I was living in Abu Dhabi while I was here, and then I was working in Toronto and in Hamilton. So, but the first part of the question, though, my perspective. That's an interesting question because, you know, I could say very easily, well, I'm more critical of Abu Dhabi and the Emirates here than I was. But, you know, I think I was pretty darn critical, maybe not right away, because, you know, that first year or so, there's kind of a magic, you know, you're in a new place and everything is just beautiful and the sounds, the smells, the food, everything is different. But then you dig a little deeper, you start listening a little bit more, you're watching more, you're seeing what's going on around you. And, you know, working at a place like the National, where there was yeah, you know, it's a government run newspaper, you know, so there's a little bit of self censorship going on there. And yeah, we were quite critical about that. You know, somebody would, you know, we'd get a freelancer or get one of our staff correspondents to do something, and they weren't allowed to you know, they'd write it and then we weren't allowed to run it, you know, which seemed like a waste of everybody's time. So yeah, we were critical of that, and eventually got to the point where that criticism was starting to hurt inside, and that whatever peace that we had and whatever joy we had in that first year, we had to leave. Just wasn't working.
Mhm.
Mhm. We've got a question from Jim. So he says, your other books have been rooted in Quebec, northeastern the US, places where you have deep roots. How do you feel as a writer faced with the shift in setting to a place you discovered later in life?
That's another really good question. Thank you, Jim. Um, um, Faced with the shift in setting to a place I discovered later in life. Well, again, I think that's a bit related to a bit to Rebecca's question. You know, I think it's a question. It's the idea is one of openness. You know, just being open to everything that you're sensing, especially later in life. Obviously, you know, I grew up in New England. I lived in Montreal for many years, so you know, it was quite different in that sense, setting books there. But in Abu Dhabi, I had to I had to turn different parts of the brain on and or off actually. I had to turn things off in order to allow what I was feeling to come in, uh, and um, and allow that to sink in to my heart, so that when I was actually back home in Hamilton, that I back home in Canada, that I could write that. Dan, did you? I thought I think I saw you thinking out loud there yourself. Did you want to? Because because Brilliant is set there as well. It's set in
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi. Did you want to answer that a little bit?
Um, well, I think the distance. I started writing while we were there.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know exactly why. I was writing. I was also freelancing for the paper and writing a lot of food stories, which
Yeah, and
is
you were meeting people in a way that I wasn't.
yes, that's true. But and I don't know that I didn't think it was going to be a collection. I just knew it was just the place that I went to. I guess partly to explain what I was saying to myself. Um, but the end of it, the last few stories, I think were written probably here in Hamilton. I can't remember exactly what got written where. The last story for sure, which is
Yeah.
based here, The Coming Home. It was very hard. I, I said for the longest time that going from um, Montreal to Abu Dhabi was not nearly as difficult as going from Abu Dhabi to Hamilton, and more difficult. You know that the Montreal to Hamilton, I think, would have been just impossible. So, yes, but you know, it was written over time, and there is something about distance. And one of the things that we've kind of realized in the last since the book came out, and I've sort of revisited The Emptiest Quarter, is that your those novellas are there's more love and peace and gentleness in them than my stories. I think there's an edge, and there's an edge that, you know, because it was so fresh. I had
Yeah.
so many I look like,
Yeah.
as Ray explained, you know, the first year was magical, and then the more we saw, and
Yeah.
it was brutal what we were watching.
Yeah, and maybe the difference in the books then is because you had started there. You had started writing them there. It was much more immediate. What we were feeling was right there.
Yes,
And I didn't start writing until we'd been home for 4 years.
of course.
So and things had maybe started to mellow a little bit.
But
So
in
I
reading,
suppose that, that maybe that answers a little bit more to what Rebecca was asking.
yes, I
Mhm.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have another question, Ashley?
We've got one other question. There's a bunch of
One more?
comments. Yeah,
Okay.
we've got a bunch of comments, people saying that they loved the reading or that they're tuning
No,
in from all different places.
thank you.
But we have one question from Karen saying, do you have a favorite among the
Uh,
novellas? I don't know if that's like picking a favorite child, but
um, I don't know that I have. I think my favorite novella changes on occasion, depending on where I where I am and how I'm feeling. But I love the last one, Identity. Um, Maybe because in some ways I identify with the journalist so much. But I think probably it's Oil. I think, um, like if I had one novella that would love to see made into a movie, it would be that one. There's just something about Rose's character um, that I just I love. Um, this young girl at 11 years old, just completely open to everything, and you just want to, as a writer, and I think just even as a person, you just want to be open to life that way. You know,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love Rose. So the big book giveaway.
I got a hat. I've got names written down in the hat. So I'll. Okay. Got.
Oh, it's a Blue Jays cap.
Yes, it's my husband. And Rebecca Catching. That's one.
All right.
So congratulations, Rebecca. If you can send me an email to marketing@signature-editions.com so it can get you your copies of The Emptiest Quarter and Brilliant, either physical if you're based in Canada or ebook if you're based elsewhere in the world. Thank you so much to everyone for turning
Thank
out
you
today. This was
so much
so
for
lovely.
coming out, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, as I've said many times already, there is links to purchase the books, the book in the comments section as well as in the description. So do be sure to get your hands on a copy of The Emptiest Quarter. And thank you so much. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Denise, for joining us.
Thank you,
And
Ashley.
all of the wonderful audience. Thank you
Thank
so much. This was so lovely.
This was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.